If you're sitting at your desk right now wondering whether the next camera you spend money on will actually let you shoot the kind of footage you need without turning every shoot into a juggling act, you're not alone. Most creators I've spoken with worry about getting a piece of tech that looks great on paper but then turns out to be a nightmare on location, and autofocus that loses focus half the time, a battery that dies after a few minutes of shooting, or a menu system that forces you to spend more time digging for settings than actually filming. That's why the decision to go full frame with a cinema-line body has to feel safe, not just exciting. Link is in the description if you want to check the product details on Amazon. The Sony ILME FX6 sits right in the sweet spot between the larger, heavier Cine rigs and the smaller mirrorless cameras that try to be everything at once. It promises a full-frame sensor, 10-bit 4K recording, and a built-in variable ND filter, all in a body that's still portable enough to be handheld for a day of run-and-gun shooting. The question is whether those promises translate into a tool that actually saves you time and money when you're out shooting interviews, documentaries, or indie narrative work. First, let's talk about who this camera makes sense for. If you're a serious hobbyist or a small-budget filmmaker who already knows how to work with interchangeable lenses and you need a sensor that can handle low-light situations without adding a massive amount of grain, the FX6 is worth a serious look. Its 10.2 megapixel full-frame XMirror sensor offers a huge native ISO range, up to 409,600, so you can comfortably shoot in dimly lit venues, under streetlights, or during twilight without having to bring a full set of lights. That's a real advantage when you're on location and your lighting budget is tight. On the other hand, if you're just starting out and you're still figuring out how to frame shots, manage exposure, and keep your footage stable, you might feel a little overwhelmed. The FX6 menu system, while still Sony-ish, is deeper than what you'll find on a typical consumer mirrorless camera, and the multitude of picture profiles can be a learning curve. In short, creators who already have a grasp of Sony's workflow will find it a natural step up. Total beginners should probably spend a bit more time in the entry-level space before moving on. Autofocus is often the make-or-break feature for run-and-gun situations, and the FX6 delivers a hybrid system with 627 phase detect points and real-time IAF tracking. In practice, this means that if you're recording a moving interview subject or a child running across a park, the camera can keep the eye locked even when the subject changes direction quickly. I've seen footage from indie projects where the focus never missed a beat, and that level of reliability saves you from having to redo takes or resort to costly post-production refocus work. The downside is that the AF can occasionally hunt in very low-contrast scenes. Think a night shot with a single light source, so you'll still want to keep an eye on focus and maybe switch to manual focus for those tricky moments. Stabilization on the FX6 is purely electronic. There's no in-body sensor shift to speak of. That means you'll still rely heavily on lenses with optical stabilization or external rigs like gimbals for smooth movement. However, the camera's electronic variable ND filter, ranging from 1/4 to 1/128th, helps you keep apertures wide open without overexposing your footage in bright daylight. In real-world terms, you can stay at f/1.8 for a shallow depth-of-field look on a sunny afternoon and simply dial the ND up, rather than stopping down and losing that creamy bokeh. That's a massive time saver when you're shooting events or documentaries where you can't control the lighting. The only practical weakness is that the ND is electronically controlled, so you'll see a slight lag when you adjust it quickly. Fast action scenes might benefit from a lens-mounted ND instead. Battery confidence is another pain point that gets talked about a lot in forums. The FX6 uses Sony's NPFZ100 battery, which is the same large cell that powers the A7 Sci-A. In real use, a fully charged battery gives you roughly 120 minutes of continuous 4K recording at 60 frames per second with internal recording. If you're doing longer interviews or multi-hour events, you'll still need at least one spare, but the battery life is far better than many of the older cinema cameras that required a separate external power module. The downside is that the battery compartment is still a bit tight. Swapping batteries while wearing gloves in cold weather can be fiddly, so plan your workflow accordingly. Now, let's talk lenses. Sony's E-mount ecosystem is one of the strongest points for any full-frame shooter. You have access to a huge range of native lenses, from the affordable 2470mm f/2.8G Master to the ultra-wide 1635mm f/2.8, as well as a plethora of third-party options from Sigma, Tamron, and Zeiss. Because the FX6 keeps a standard Sony mount, adapting